Welcome back to Mythic Codex Legends Unveiled, the place where mythology, folklore, and legends come alive. I'm your host Eliza, and tonight we'll uncover the stories that have captivated humanity for thousands of years. Turn the page, our journey begins now. The smile you were never meant to see. Image you're walking home alone. It's getting late. The streets are quiet. There aren't many people around. Maybe you hear your own footsteps. Maybe you hear the wind. And then you notice a woman standing ahead of you. She's beautiful. She's dressed normally enough that you don't immediately think anything is wrong. Except for one thing. She's wearing a mask. She looks at you. And then she asks a simple question. Am I pretty? What would you say? Because according to the legend, there may not be a correct answer. Tonight, we're going to Japan, and we're meeting one of its most disturbing urban legends. Not a creature hiding in the woods, not a monster crawling out of the darkness. A woman with a pair of scissors, a mask covering her face, and a smile that should never have been there. This is the story of the woman behind the mask. Her traditional name is Kuchisake-onna. The Japanese, it's roughly translate to Slit-Mouthed Woman. And honestly, I don't think there could be a more fitting name. Because the most horrifying part of this legend isn't what she looks like when you first see her. It's what she's hiding. The mask. That mask is important because underneath it is the reason you're supposed to be afraid. There are several versions of the Kuchisake-onna. One of the most famous says that she was once a beautiful woman who was married to samurai. According to the story, her husband became convinced that she had to be unfaithful. And in a moment of rage, he attacked her. He cut her mouth from one side to the other, creating a horrible wound that stretched across her face. In some versions, he is said to have asked her, "Who will think you're beautiful now?" She died. But that wasn't the end. Her anger remained. Her humiliation remained. Her pain remained. And she returned as something far worse than the woman she had once been. A vengeful spirit. An Oni. And now she walks the streets looking for people to ask the question that defines her legend. Am I beautiful? So, let's say the person's walking home. She approaches you. She looks at you. And she asks, "Am I beautiful?" You say no. Bad choice. According to one version of the legend, she pulls out a pair of scissors and attacks you. But what if you say yes? You might think you figured it out. You haven't. Because she slowly reaches up and removes the mask. And that's when you see it. Her mouth has been cut open from the corner of her lips toward her ears. A terrible, unnatural smile. And then she asks you again, "How about now?" Think about that for a second. The first question was trap. The second question is worse, because now you've seen what she's hiding. And whatever answer you give, you're gambling with your life. Image the wound. Not just a small cut. The legend describes the corners of her mouth being opened all the way towards her ears. The result is a face that looks permanently frozen in a gruesome smile. And then there's the weapon, scissors. Long, sharp scissors. In some versions, the victim who answers incorrectly is simply killed. But another version is even worse. If you answer yes to her second question, she may decide to make you look like her. She takes those scissors and she cuts your mouth to match hers. So you don't simply die, you become part of the legend. Another person carrying the same horrible smile. Another person who could someday stand in the darkness wearing a mask, waiting for someone else. But here's where it gets interesting. The story doesn't just tell you how to die. It also gives you possible ways to survive. And this is one of my favorite parts of the legend. Some versions say that answering something like so can confuse her. Other versions suggest saying something meaningless, something unexpected, anything that breaks the pattern. Because maybe the Kuchisake-onna isn't just testing your honesty. Maybe she's testing whether you will play by her rules. And if you refuse to play, maybe you get a chance to escape. So, here's a question for you. Now I want you to ask you something. If you were walking alone at night and a masked woman suddenly asks you, "Am I beautiful?" What would you say? Would you tell her yes? Would you tell her no? Or would you try to confuse her? Think about your answer, because we're not finished yet. What's fascinating about the Kuchisake-onna is that she didn't remain just a spooky story whispered between a few people. The legend exploded across Japan around 1978 to 1979. Children began talking about her. Stories spread, rumors multiplied, and suddenly something that sounded impossible began creating very real fear. The legend became so whispered that newspapers and authorities became involved in attempts to calm the public. Think about that. A monster from a story causing real fear in real communities. Children were afraid to walk home alone. People began looking suspiciously at women wearing masks. And the story kept changing as it traveled. That's one of the most fascinating things about folklore. The story grows. Someone adds a detail. Someone else changes the ending. Another person invents a way to survive. And suddenly, everyone knows slightly different version. So, here's something else I want you to think about. Why do you think this particular legend became so terrifying? Was it the scissors? Was it the multiple mutilated face? Was it the idea that there was no safe answer? Or was it because she looked completely human? Because honestly, I think that's what makes her terrifying. She doesn't need horns. She doesn't need glowing eyes. She doesn't need to crawl out of a grave. She can simply walk towards you and ask a question. See, I think what's terrifying is what you don't know. What's under the mask, that's terrifying. Because she can ask you if she's beautiful, but how would you know? A whole half of her face is covered. So I guess it's the trap she sets is scarier than anything else. That's my answer. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. There's something almost cruel about the way this legend works. She hides her face. You can't see what she really looks like. So your imagination does the work for her. You see the mask. You see the eyes. You wonder what's underneath. And then she takes it off. That's the moment everything changes, because suddenly the woman you thought was strange became something terrifying. And that smile isn't a smile at all. It's a wound. As the legend spread, people began creating their own rules for surviving the Kuchisake-onna. Some said you could answer with something neutral. Others said you could distract her. Some stories claim that certain words can make her hesitate. And there were stories of people claiming they had seen women who matched her description. Whether these encounters were real, misunderstandings, rumors, or simply stories that grew over time, that's where folklore becomes fascinating. Because eventually, the question isn't just, did this really happen? The question becomes, why did so many people believe it could? So, here's my final question for you. If the Kuchisake-onna appeared in front of you tonight, would you pull off her mask or would you run? 'Cause personally, I think I'd run because there are some mysteries that I need answered. And there are definitely some masks that are better left on. There's no way that I'm staying there until that mask is coming off. I'm gone. Now image you're walking home alone. The street is empty. You hear footsteps behind you. You turn around, nothing. You keep walking. Then you notice someone standing underneath a streetlight. A woman, long hair, pale face, a mask covering her mouth. She looks at you, and slowly she walks closer. You don't move. She stops. She tilts her head. And then you hear those words. Am I beautiful? What would you say? Maybe you remember the stories. Maybe you remember the tricks. Maybe you tell yourself it's just a legend. But then she reaches towards her face. Her fingers touch the edge of her mask. And she begins to pull it down. Slowly, very slowly, until you see the smile, the impossible smile. And she asks you again, how about now? And suddenly you realize something. The legend was never really about whether she was beautiful. It was about fear. It was about What happens when someone forces you to answer a question? When every answer could be the wrong one. And maybe that's why the story survived. Because somewhere in the darkness, we all know what it's like to be afraid of giving the wrong answer. The Kuchisake-onna is remembered as the split-mouthed woman, but I think there's another name that fits her even better: the woman behind the mask. Because the scariest part isn't what she shows you. It's what she makes you image before she ever removes that mask. So the next time you're walking alone and you see someone wearing a mask, maybe don't stare. Maybe don't ask questions. And whatever you do, if she looks at you and asks, "Am I beautiful?" choose your answer carefully, because according to the legend, she already chooses hers. And that's where I'll leave you tonight. This is Mythic Codex Legends Unveiled. Until next time, keep the lights on, keep your eyes open, and remember, some legends are better left unexplained.